and then we know it's time to go. So real quick, I don't know if you met my whole family. All right, I'll see you guys later. I'm going back to Durham. Man, what a tough crowd, and it's coming from that guy. No, now you threw me off. Thanks for having me, though. This is really great, and you guys are kind of my guinea pigs because this is the first church that's really asked me to come and talk and do much because we haven't really got super in-depth enrolling in Durham yet. But real quick, you know my name. Hopefully you met my wife. She's over there. There's my boy that's walking in a little late. The other one's somewhere probably eating a snack. I don't know. But we showed up. There he is. He's not shy at all as he's waving. We showed up in Durham last February-ish. They actually didn't move till June after school with some work stuff, so they didn't join me full-time till June. So we've really only been there, I keep saying we've only been there about 6-7 months as a whole family, getting to know the community, doing work. But maybe real quick before that, we've been in mission settings my whole career. As I was sitting in a gymnasium, an auditorium at the SEM, we're sitting there, and I don't know if you know this, Pastor Struss knows this and how it works, but they'll just start, the president gets up and just starts going alphabetical. And all of a sudden, Doug Lang, Light of the Valley, Lutheran Church. We're like, that's not in the Midwest. Layton, Utah. What? Where's Utah? Never. Okay, we heard of Utah. That's not true. But so we get sent there, and we spend 6 years there working on a mission there in Layton, it's a suburb of Salt Lake City. And then at some point, you know, God in his wisdom, he sends out calls to his workers, and we probably had, I don't even know, Yulia, do you remember? 4 or 5 different calls that we said, no, God wants us here. But then one, God's like, you got to go. So we spent the last 8 years in Jacksonville, North Carolina. That too was a mission church. They were small. We were meeting in a storefront. In fact, our whole storefront could have fit in this sanctuary. That is not an understatement. My family can verify that. And have you been down there yet, Pastor Strutz, Jacksonville? So, but you saw the new church, though. You didn't see the storefront. So we were there for about 5.5 years before God, through his people, we built a new facility. That one Pastor Strutz has seen, which I think God used his people to do a fantastic job. They did great, and they're still doing great things with a new pastor. And now we're in Durham. So with that said, how would you answer that question? Because we kind of talked about mission and why and purpose in the sermon, but I think this is an important question. If you're going to be a mission church, which I would humbly say every church is a mission church, no matter how big or small, what is the mission of the church? Share the gospel. Anybody else want to put it a different way? I sometimes say you can't just say Jesus either. That's the Sunday school answer. Jesus. You're always going to be right if you say Jesus, by the way. Tell people about Jesus. Can you think of certain passages? What does Jesus say? Go and tell and make disciples, right? Because that idea of disciples and discipleship too, it's a lifelong process as we grow in our faith through the power of the Spirit, through the preaching of the Word. So if we know that's our mission, I think that's the easy part because Jesus gives it to us. Even though, can I put someone on the spot? What is your mission statement here? You can't answer, Pastor Strutz. Hopefully you know. Anybody know what the mission? Do you have one? Yeah? What's the mission statement? Not trying to embarrass anybody, but do you guys know what it is? Grow in the grace and knowledge of Jesus. Are you reading it off the sheet?
No,
Is that right? Okay. Pastor Strutz is going to chime in at the end. Anybody else? Pastor Strutz, what is it?
Our mission statement is somewhat long and convoluted with theological terminology.
Did I open up a can? I should put it back in the can.
So we are looking at revising that mission statement down to 3 simple words. We're grounded in God's word, grafted to fellow believers, and growing, so that we have words that are connected with the name of our church, Tree of Life. So that's soon to be put forth as our new mission statement, slogan, easy way to remember. Grounded, grafted, growing.
Grounded, grafted, growing. I like that. That's great terminology to connect with Tree of Life too. So, well, God bless you on that effort, and don't be embarrassed. Lots of churches, all the churches that I've ever been in, they've had to consider, do we tweak it, do we change it? Because if you have a paragraph, who's going to memorize the whole thing? That gets hard. So simplify it, like go and tell, to save all people, grounded, grafted, growing. 3 G's, I like it. So right in Durham, we had to think about these things too. Now, I want you to close your eyes for a minute. Can you do that? I'm dead serious. I'm going to wait until everybody in here closes their eyes so they can kind of visualize this. Because this is kind of under the why are we doing what we're doing. I want you for a moment to picture your kids, if you have any. I want you to think about and picture in your mind's eye your spouses. Maybe it's a grandkid. Maybe it's your grandma or grandpa if they're still with us. Maybe it's your best friend, your next door neighbor, the barista, as I mentioned in the sermon, or the guy that checks you in at the gym or at the doctor's office. Can you see them? Keep your eyes closed. Now I want you to picture an hourglass above their head. Sand's falling through. Little speck by little speck. The top is getting smaller, the bottom filling with sand. Because the reality is, friends, you can open your eyes if you want. We all got one of those above our head. Our time is limited. Maybe you've heard the word time of grace, the amount of time God gives us to know of Jesus, to hear the good news through the word and sacrament, and then to share it. Everybody you know, including yourself, has one of those hourglasses, because there will come a day in time that God says, that's it, your time's up. And the reason I bring that up is because I know at Refuge and with Durham and this group ministry we're doing, I've talked a little bit about this with them too, because this kind of adds the urgency to what's our mission and the why. We want to tell as many people about Jesus, people whose time on earth is limited just like our own. And the reason I bring that up, because another big thing, and I actually just dropped this out of my sermon, so you're welcome. So it wasn't too long. I wanted to talk like this, because one of the things we've been talking about is how can we be the kind of church that doesn't make decisions based on the people who are here, but the lost souls we're trying to reach for Jesus. In other words, we got to try really hard, because our default is not to think about others, it's to think about me. How can we do all things to the glory of God based on trying to reach out to others with the good news of Jesus? Not just what we want, not just what we think, not just what we like, but what will give glory to God and bring many more souls to Him. And so I asked you to think about somebody in your life, and I want you to think about this, not just today, but as you carry out your ministry here at Tree of Life. What are you willing to give up? Find that image again of whoever you thought of. What are you willing to give up so that son or daughter is sitting next to you in church, singing the praises to the King who set them free? What are you willing to give up and sacrifice in your own life so that your spouse is here? Because maybe all of you have the blessing of you're with your spouse, but maybe some of you, your spouse doesn't come. What would you be willing to give up so that your grandkids and your great-grandkids would know of a God who loves them and saved them and died for them? I'm going to kind of leave it there. These are questions that I hope you take with you in the weeks and months ahead as Pastor Strutz and y'all work to think about how you can best serve. But what are you willing to give up so that Jesus might be front and center, so that His will might be done, so that others might know Him? And you're going to have to work at this, because I've already noticed even in our little launch group with like 10 people, we're really, really small, it's really easy to go back, well, I kind of want us to do this. How will that reach out for Jesus, though? Sometimes it does. Sometimes we have to, well, it's because I want what I want. But God will give you the help. He'll give you the strength to walk with Him. This is scary because I don't know what's on the next one. I hate to say we'll go quick, but this is kind of the whole sermon in some ways. How would you answer that question? How are we different than other churches? And this is by no means I'm trying to pick on any other church, and I'm not going to say, let's talk about this denomination. That's not the question. But how would you answer that for yourself and for others? What makes you unique and different? Okay? I'm going to have to ask you to unpack that because that's a loaded word, especially in the South. People laugh. Yeah. So what does that mean, evangelical? Because we absolutely are evangelical.
Yes, we are Bible-based, 100% God's Word, period.
Yeah.
That's what we preach here.
Does anybody literally know what toi angelion evangelical means? Pastor Strutz, again, you can't answer some of these. He knows that because he knows. It's actually across the top of the chapel when you go in at Sem. Kerixita to angelion. To preach the gospel. Evangelical. We're a gospel-based church pointing people to Jesus. And I bring this up because one of the things that pastors don't often get to do, but a guy trying to start a new church does, I went to dozens and dozens and dozens of churches, particularly in the Durham area. And there was one thing missing. Now, not all of them. Some of them, okay, I can, long gospel, but a majority of them, you know what was missing? The gospel. It was all law, and even their gospel was law. So many times I did not hear a message, and we just went to one recently, and my wife can testify to this. And again, this is not to pick on them, but I'm just like, oh, he was so close. He was so close. He was doing so good, and then he made another rule and another law instead of setting the heart free by saying it's Jesus. That's a pretty cool thing that I think we have, that you have a pastor who's going to do that for you week in and week out, that he's going to give you Jesus. The only guy who can set us free. So there you go, full and free forgiveness in Jesus. Again, I'm not saying other churches don't have it, but sometimes you're like, where is it, man? You guys got it. That's a treasure, that's a precious gift. Don't forget it. Real quick, who are we sharing it with? I think this is, maybe it doesn't need to be spoken, but we kind of labeled who are we sharing it with. Obviously, we want to reach all people. Right? We want to reach, if a Wells person transplants into Durham, we want to welcome them. If there's somebody from another Christian background who is maybe seeking, who doesn't know, they want to ask questions, what's this thing about crazy Lutherans? We want to welcome them. Of course, D-Church, that simply means maybe people who grew up in the church, but for all kinds of reasons drifted away from the church, the unchurched, and then unbelievers. Because ultimately, right, what did Jesus came to do? Seeking to save the lost, and now he calls you to go and tell the lost about him. So there you go. Was that it? Did I hit a button? I'm going to run through this really quick, only because now Pastor Strutz can fill you in the weeks ahead, because he was actually a part of a multi-site. Y'all know what that means? We're kind of using the terminology. Oops, going way too fast. Multi-church, it's really the same thing. Does anybody know what that means? Multi-site, multi-church? Go ahead. That's a great way to put it. One church, different locations, right? So we are partnered with, Durham it kind of was birthed out of Gethsemane in North Raleigh. Way before I ever got involved, there was talks, there was dreams, and so the goal is that we're not two completely separate entities, but how can we work together, hand in hand? I would humbly say the more I had to read up on this, because I was pretty new to this whole, I've never done a multi-church, I've never done multi-site stuff at all, and they kind of said, now that you're here, well, you're the Durham guy and you're the expert in this. No, I'm not. So I had to do a lot of reading. And kind of what I found as I thought about it more, the early Christian church was a lot like that. A multi-church, right? Acts 2, anybody know that section? It's after Pentecost. Said that they devoted themselves to the apostles preaching and teaching, in other words, the message of Jesus. They broke bread together, they got together in each other's homes, and God added to their number daily. So they did life together, especially spiritually. Now, one of the things that I think it's interesting to point out here, maybe we're not used to this because it kind of got abandoned in this country. I think a lot of the togetherness, and this is even among our Wells churches, because we live in a culture that's very independent, right? Me, myself, and I, and we don't always like to get into those groups. So if you kind of look at church history a little bit, a lot of this stuff did not happen, but it's coming back. And I would argue, and I'll leave it at this, and I'll let you ask questions in just a minute about this or anything else. Technically, we are a multi-church with you, and it's called the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. I believe that, right? In many ways, that's a multi-site. Different locations, but we're one church, one confession of faith, one Lord, one baptism, all those amazing, great things. But we're in places like Cary and Durham and Milwaukee and Florida and Phoenix and Africa and Hong Kong, but we're still one church. So I think, you guys got it. One church made up of multiple locations. I'm not going to go all through these. The pillar model is kind of 50 to 60% of churches. That's it. That's what you guys are. You're one standalone church. You're autonomous. Now, yes, you're a part of a synod, but locally you're autonomous. You're meeting in a single location, single service. This is what most of our churches are. They're pillars. Gallery model simply means one church, one location, multiple services and venues. Like Raleigh, they have 2 services there. They would be under this gallery model. And I'm not going to bore you too much. But this is stuff we're still working through. Come on, clicker. You got it. Am I going too far away? Kind of the cooperative. All right. Do you want to just hit slides back there? Maybe that'll be better. Next one, please. No, next one, I'm sorry. So this one is maybe the one, if you know of any churches in the area, this is what we're not trying to do, just maybe for full disclosure, a franchise model. Have you all heard of the Summit in the Triangle?
Is Hope like that too?
Hope.
I think so.
Oh, New Hope. I don't know. I don't think they have a ton of campuses, though. Not like Summit does. Summit has more. There's a thing called Vintage Church. But anyway, Hope may, because I did go to New Hope one Sunday, but I don't remember them talking about any of their campuses. But basically, franchise model, think McDonald's, right? It's one church. They clone at different locations. They don't often think of, some of these in strengths and weaknesses. They don't often think about the context of their culture. They just say, well, we're just going to cookie cutter and plop it down. Because this is probably the most pushback when people ask me, like, no, this is not what we're trying to do. Because the franchise model would be this too. Let's say Pastor Strutz, he's the head guy. He's going to be on every screen, even if I'm the campus pastor in Durham. He's on the screen, and so there's not local preaching and things like that. So I'll just throw that out there because people ask me that one quite a bit. So we're not trying to do that one. What we're trying to do is kind of a federation cooperative model. And some of this language John Hine has used in our synod too. I don't know what kind of language you use, Pastor Strutz, or what model you guys did, but kind of a cooperation. So we realize North Raleigh and Durham are completely different ministry contexts in so many ways. So there's going to be some things that we do that they don't, and that they do that we don't. We're also going to have local live preaching because there's no way I'm giving up preaching, and Pastor Phil is not going to give up preaching, and Pastor Strutz would never do that either because we're trained preachers. We love to do that. So those are kind of the things that we're still working through. We're still in its infancy, but we're kind of going to that cooperation. So we're going to share the same name. We're going to share leadership that's represented from both. We're going to share manpower and resources the best we can because we believe we're better together. One of the taglines we've been using is unique and united. We're certainly united, but we're going to have uniquenesses to our ministry, just like Cary does it a little bit differently. I've been around Cary. I've driven the streets. Cary's a different community than driving around Durham. It just is. If you haven't done it, try it sometime. They're different communities. So get to know your communities and serve your people that way. I won't bore you with the rest of these. Let's see what else I got. I'm going to open it up to you guys because I know we don't have a whole lot of time too, and if you guys give me good feedback too, I can put you more meat and potatoes on this PowerPoint. But talking to Pastor Strutz, I wanted to give this opportunity to a Q&A. He mentioned to me that you guys are looking at growing, whether Apex or other places too, so that's really exciting. So I'm going to shut up, and I'm also going to, you can ask my wife and kids anything too, so it doesn't just have to be me because they're part of the ministry as well. Seth.
So, I was just curious, structurally, so is there support from the whole mission board financially, or is this some something that Gethsemane's doing really with its own strength, so to speak? We go to refuge now.
That's a great question. The mission board and the synod, 110% behind it. In fact, really what we're doing in Durham, like salary and our family being compensated, taken care of, and most of the day in and day out budgetary items, that's actually being paid through the synod by the mission board. So I have to do the reports every month where Pastor Phil does not, and so it is very much supported and helped out by the mission board and the synod as a whole. That's a great question, though. I think overall they want more and more churches to kind of do it the way we're doing, because somebody does support us at some level. So it's not the whole budget, it's not half the budget even, but hey, we can kick in 20%, and then the goal would be as we grow and doing all the numbers and the boring stuff that I don't always get into. But yeah, so right now it's almost fully funded by the mission board. So any other questions? And it doesn't have to be mission board or multi-church. It can be whatever you want it to be. Pastor Strutz, and then we'll go back there. I see a couple hands. Go ahead.
What are you doing to connect with lost souls and unbelievers in Durham?
A lot of what we're doing is just trying to hang out in the community, talk to people, right? You can't meet people unless you get out in the community. So recently, I've met people that work in nonprofits. I've met people, other pastors, if they're willing to talk. I met a couple of business owners, because some of those people are the best. Like, hey, I'm in your neighborhood. You've been here 20 years. What's a need? I'm a preacher. I want to serve you with Jesus. How can we meet those needs? Because you've been here. I've been here 8 months. So that's really a lot of it. Just, I don't want to, friendship evangelism is probably the wrong way to say it, because I don't even know these people, but just going into coffee shops and sitting down. And then when Renda has a chance, I'm like, hey, Renda, can I pick your brain? She owns the coffee shop that I sometimes like to go to on the south side. A lot of that kind of stuff right now. Some of the people had their hand up. We'll go here, over there. We'll go back here first.
Are you meeting every Sunday?
We are not. We are not. In fact, this first quarter, the goal is we're going to all meet the core group's going to meet at our house, and we're going to do some worship, and then after worshiping, we're going to talk about some nuts and some bolts, what's the next steps and everything like that, and we're really making a more concerted effort. Really, the first 8 months, a lot of it's been working with the mission board, working with myself and then Pastor Phil in both campuses. What's this going to look like? How's this going to work? Because if we don't have a foundation, we're going to fall. So a lot of that work has been happening. So 2023 is the big Durham push, the launch group. Don't pen this in yet, but September 10th, 2023, we're shooting for public worship every Sunday in Durham. That's the goal. Go ahead, Roger.
Just go a little further on where you're saying that now, I guess, then you're kind of affiliated then as, really part of, I guess, the refuge in Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
But yet now you have separate funds from the mission board.
Yep.
Subsidized separately, but yet it still would be one budget since you're really one church.
Yes. One of the things I've learned being a mission pastor for this long too is just, it's a process. They're separate budgets, but yet they're not. It depends on who you talk to of how they view it. Because the mission board is going to look at it in some ways like, we know you're together, but we're looking at it as separate because North Raleigh's budget is kind of, I don't want to say it's been the same thing always, but like they're the established church, and you're the mission church that needs 90+% help because they're filling in a little bit. So like, they're actually having a budget meeting today that I got to get over to after I'm done with y'all, budget meeting and stuff. And Durham's budget, it's going to be kind of quick. Like, here's the budget the synod gave us. We have a little bit of wiggle room, but not much, because they have a mind or a dollar figure in their mind of how much they're going to give us. And they have no problem coming back and saying, why did you put 10,000 here? We think you only need 7. And they reserve that right because they bless us with those kind of funds. So from that standpoint, the synod still keeps it separate, Roger. I don't know if that fully answered your question, and I don't know if I can fully answer, but from Durham's side and the synod side, they look at it that way, but they still say, well, we know you're one church.
Yeah, it's just the more of the organization and operation aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
You got the one budget, and that can have pluses and minuses.
Yep.
But then also the day-to-day operations and the base location, wherever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You got one voters meeting, I guess it's going to that's
Mhm.
gonna kind of dictate what the branch is doing, even though we like to do more things independently. And
Mhm.
so there's, again, pluses and minuses. But,
Yes.
but now is the Raleigh considered now a subsidized congregation, or is that just the Durham branch, I guess, or whatever you would call it?
Another great question. See, nobody's really even asked me that. Well, I think the 10 of us in Durham just kind of, no, they're not considered subsidy, although they have to give the budget rationale and numbers to the synod because we're doing a multi-site. And that's one thing I just told the North Raleigh campus. So they're like, oh, great. Like, yeah, you got to do a little bit. But the heavy lifting is still coming from the Durham side with the budget as far as the synod is concerned. And I think what you bring up too, that this is, you guys are going to learn this, God willing, I hope you do, because you're going to want to think about Apex or wherever you guys are thinking about. There's a healthy tension, right, between North Raleigh and Durham because they're different communities, and that's where you got to work through a lot of stuff. How is that going to work with budgeting stuff? How is it going to work with resources? What can we share, and what are we not going to be able to share? And again, we don't have all the answers yet. I don't. Which it makes it more difficult, right? Because you're an autonomous congregation by yourself. You're a little bit quicker because you just get the crew together real quick on a Sunday. Hey, what are we doing? Okay, we're on the same page. Good. Well, now you have two different locations and campuses. Hey, we got to get the players involved to get on the same page and agree upon mission. Did that answer your question, Roger? Or did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just you mentioned earlier that Synod supports what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And is that it's treated as two separate, one congregation, I guess, from a budget and operating standpoint? Or do they really care if you have two locations? It sounds like you're going to be having to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a budget subsidy or something for,
Mhm.
The new location.
Yep.
And whether it's part of the home base or not, does that really make a difference to them?
I guess I'd put it this way. The synod knows 110% of what we're doing. They're supporting it. They, in some ways, I think they like it because there's at least some subsidy coming from the North Raleigh campus. Because a lot of times when they plant a church, if it's standalone, 100% is coming from the mission board and the synod offerings. And so if you guys come in 5 years, 3 years, maybe next year, I don't know, Nathan, right? And say, hey, we want to start maybe a daughter or a multi-set or whatever in Apex. We got $50,000 to start it. They're going to listen real quick, as opposed to we're going to drop a random guy in a place where we have nothing. So yes, again, I don't know if I'm answering your question. And I'll be honest, I'm not a huge into budget guy and number guy. I let other people that know what they're doing do that. I like to tell people about Jesus. But from a synod standpoint, they are fully supportive of us. Mission counselors, our district mission board chairman, I'm talking to them maybe more regular than Pastor Phil does because I'm the Durham side and we're the fully subsidized side. But yeah, so, and they have no problem giving insight, and sometimes it's good, and sometimes they say, well, we're not boots on the ground, so what's happening? So, Seth, I'm going to get over here just to get a couple people and come back to you, Seth.
Just 25 years ago,
Mhm.
Tree of Life
Yeah.
came from Gethsemane, now Refuge. This is not necessarily a new concept in this area.
Mm-hmm.
I think, model-wise is what's different.
Yep.
And that's probably why some of us old-timers are having a little bit harder time to grasp it. We're not
Mhm.
used to the multi-church concept, let's call it. But, I fully understand more about it from what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, going back to, let's say, biblical times and churches really supporting community. So I guess my question is, you're here at Tree of Life today. How can Tree of Life support the
Ooh.
Durham Refuge?
That's a great question. Obviously, I'll give you the standards, right, pray for us. If you ever need a preacher every now and then, I like preaching, and right now I'm not getting to do it every Sunday, so if this guy needs a weekend off. And then at some point down the road in the future, as we do more stuff, get involved. It's not that far of a drive if we're doing a booth out at a local event, and you want to show up and show support, just like hopefully, Pastor Strutt's actually, and I've never had another pastor in the area do this, because we're all these pillar standalone congregations, but here's our newsletter, here's what's happening. Oh, cool. Share that information. Doesn't mean you have to. There's no pressure, right? But hey, You guys are doing something, I don't know, a chili cook-off or barbecue in the park. Well, that'd be really cool. Show up and be a part of that and support it. And be able to share. I wouldn't know if he didn't share that information. So maybe some of that goes on us as the preachers and the leaders too. Let each other know what's happening. And it's really good too, because brothers can help each other like, hey, Lang, what are you doing? We should talk. I'll buy the lunch. Okay, good, because we need that too. Did that help?
Yes, and just one other comment. At the very beginning of Gethsemane, which is 50 years ago, okay, we had a strong presence, or a presence from Duke University students. And it, as a child growing up around that, that was so refreshing to me. I mean, they gave a lot of insights. They came into our home and ate lunch with us, or dinner after churches and such. And, you know, it's just a thought that that's a good resource for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, in fact, this whole area, I mean, between UNC, NC State, and Duke, we have some huge pockets of academia, and not to go in too deep, but we know that they're not getting Jesus there. How can we help those? Because I honestly think like the middle school, high school, and college are some of the most critical years. Now, I would argue we shouldn't wait till they go off to school to equip our youth to stand tall on the foundation of the truths of God's word, but that whole period is super critical. That's where a lot of times, and these are things that they had me doing in the last year too, that's when a lot of our people drift. Some, they fall away, but most of them aren't leaving because they're like, I hate all you guys and I don't like this. They just slowly drift, and if nobody's reaching out, it's so much easier. So yeah, that's excellent. I don't know who has hands up first. One of you two, or you.
Can I just follow up on that?
Oh, yeah.
We're still learning and getting to know this whole area and community, which is so fun to explore, but something I've noticed that's true for Durham is there is so much crossover. People live in one area, they work in a different area. You know, as we look for ways to connect with our community, I find that a lot of people that work in my community actually come from all kinds of different places. So what a blessing. We haven't always had that, you know, in our previous congregations, but you know, there's, oh, you live in Morrisville. Okay, well, you know, if an opportunity presents itself, I could refer them to you guys.
Yeah.
Or somebody drives from Raleigh, you know, and in the same way, we have so much presence in the triangle now. We truly can be much more local to wherever people are coming from. We have a farther reach, you know, where it's a lot harder for me to, right now, without having the presence in Durham, to get any of my neighbors to drive 45 minutes to Raleigh for a Sunday worship service. That's kind of a hard sell. But, you know, when we have a more localized presence, it's a lot easier to meet people where they're at. So maybe that's something we could do as three churches,
Yeah.
boots on the ground.
I mean, honestly, a lot of those people aren't that far from Tree of Life, Cary, either, just because of how the interstate system is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I personally think that Tree of Life, yes, we're very an individual, unique church, but supporting the greater concept of Wells is what we're all here for. And yes, you have a very diverse area, but it's so interesting over there too.
Alyssa has a hand up.
Yeah, thanks for quarterback it a little bit for me. Thank you.
We've got about 5 minutes left, so.
So I know you mentioned that you hadn't been able to start worship services yet. I realize that takes time.
Mhm.
Could you talk about what have you been able to do to connect people to God's word? Or like, are you doing Bible studies or meeting people and doing one-on-one stuff? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, honestly, up to this point, and this month is going to be a huge month to kind of turn the corner. I would say probably about 80 to 90% of my work has been over at the North Raleigh campus, doing the nuts and bolts of the foundational work. What's this going to look like? It took way longer than I thought it would. And this guy can chime in because he's done a multi-site before. He's in a couple different scenarios. So this is the year. Like right now, this first quarter, we're going to do the launch team, right? So we're going to lay the foundation there, and then we're going to start adding to it and preview worship services. Simply just like, hey, we got a place to rent, and those would be things that we can start inviting the prospects to, the people we meet, training my own people to, hey, give a card to the barista. You know, you're going to Duke, invite your classmate. We're going to do something Friday night. Those are some of the things that we're going to start to do real quick here in the new year, just to meet people and connect with them. Yes?
Seth?
Can I put me off on that too?
I did say they can ask you questions too.
Now, the mission board does their own research before they
Mhm.
move forward with a mission plan, but a lot of it has also been getting to know your community, what's already here, what's the makeup of our community,
Mhm.
what kind of things already exist, where do people worship now? What's the percentage of people that do worship? Where do they go? Do they have any religious affiliation? Visiting those local churches he already mentioned, you know, what does it look like? What's their format? What are people used to? What are they looking for? What's the makeup? What is the different pockets of different neighborhoods and areas? And, you know, he talks about working with Raleigh, but one of those things about the model is contextualizing it to our community in Durham. Okay, well, this is Raleigh, and that's what works for them. How much of that should we replicate? How much of it do we need to change to make it appropriate for our community, and why, right? So, I feel like that's been an important piece of that too.
Mhm.
I think Seth had a hand up, and then, please.
And maybe you're just not at the point to answer this question, but Durham is obviously a big, sprawling, small city, or
Mhm.
and geographically, it's
Yeah.
very sprawling and large. And, you know, I think you're in North Durham.
We are. Mhm.
And if I were to drive to your house, it would take longer than for me to drive here. Because we're in the Parkwood and,
Mhm.
southeast corner.
Yeah, well, you know where Northern High School is, right?
Yeah.
We live right by Northern High School.
So the basic question is, you have your house somewhere. Have you really been thinking much about where specifically in Durham you might want to look for at least a temporary worship place?
Yes,
Are you in the process of looking?
yeah, we're still in the process of losing, but I think, I mean, for one, naturally, and the mission board guys will tell you this too, like, kind of draw a radius around where you bought a house, because this is where you live, this is where your kids go to school, this is the community that God has planted you in. So in other words, probably South Point is not where we're going to put a church, because that's a 30-40 minute drive from my house, and I won't regularly be in that community, which would make it harder, I think, to do mission work. So we kind of looked at maybe the down, and if you know Durham, kind of downtown, North Durham, Briar Creek, so if you kind of drew a triangle like this, somewhere probably in that general vicinity is where we would be located. And some of it, again, it's just based on, hey, you bought a house in North Durham, why are you doing work 40 minutes away? That bloom where God planned you kind of thing. So again, it's not in stone yet. Those are questions, because, and here right now, we're definitely considered what I would call a regional church. People, no matter where we put it in Durham, because we're so small right now, those different families would have to drive a little bit of ways. But the goal in some ways is to be more of a local neighborhood community church, and not simply just a regional church where people drive 45 minutes away. Because what I found in 15 years being a pastor is the Welsers will drive an hour. I will drive an hour. The unchurched, they will not drive an hour. They just won't. So how do we tap into people who need to hear Jesus in that area? So, go ahead.
Roger had a hand up, I think that'll be our last one then.
I wanted to ask a people question. Are members of Gethsemane part of your core group, or are these people that were not associated with Gethsemane?
They are all coming from North Raleigh campus, yes. So there's nobody like brand new, never been Wells, never been a part of it or anything. They're all at the North Raleigh campus and have been for a number of years, as far as I know, if I remember all their stories. So.
If I might, thank you. For that. Thanks everyone for the questions.
Yeah.
I know, Pastor Doug, you said you aren't able to stay along real long.
I'll stay for a little bit. If I can get out of budget meetings, I'm okay with that.
To be able to stick around,
Yeah.
we know you said you have a meeting in
Yep.
North Raleigh to get to. If I could be permitted to ask the last question. You mentioned about some of the things you've done. Can you share one account of one person you've gotten a chance to talk about Jesus with as you've been out in the community that might encourage us to follow that? follow that example?
I'm going to give you two because they're connected. The first guy, his name is Antonius, and I got the connection from him because he had been in the Charlotte area and he had connections to one of our churches there but never really went. And so I got to meet him and be able to share Jesus, which I didn't know going into this because the pastor didn't tell me any of the details, and I'm not picking on him, Pastor Larish, but I had no idea that he's like, because we were texting one day and I said, hey man, you know, God's blessings, I'll be praying for you, Jesus has got your back kind of thing. He's like, you do know that I don't believe that. No, he went to one of our churches. He's like, I believe in nature. And so that was just like, okay. And so, you know, the next time we talked a little bit more at the coffee shop, and I'm still in connection with him, and he introduced me, he took me to a halfway house because he's a recovering addict, and kind of rough around the edges, but he took me, he's like, you want to go to the house that I'm kind of the head of? I'm like, yeah, let's go. And I got to then meet Michael, who, you know, he's living there, going through some alcoholism and stuff, and away from his family to work on these issues through counseling and all this stuff, and got to share the same thing with him too, like, oh yeah, my buddy tells me you're a preacher. Yes, I am. I'm here to start a new church, but most importantly, I'm here to tell you about the God who loves you. His name's Jesus. So those are two just right off the top of my head that I've gotten to share Jesus with. And Michael, I don't know 100% sure. He has somewhat of a church background, so I think he's heard it before, but Antonius, straight up, like, I believe in nature. Wow, he's not just unchurched, he's an unbeliever. I mean, can we say that? He is, if he doesn't believe in Jesus. And God says, hey, you're going to get to talk to this guy who believes in nature and karma and all this stuff, and you're going to get to tell him about Jesus. And those are the kind of relationships that I'm excited that we're going to get to do more of, and that you guys are going to get to do too. I know God's going to open those doors for you all here too. And that's really when it gets cool. When you get to tell somebody about Jesus for the first time, and you just see the transformation that the Spirit brings through the power of the Word, woo! There's nothing more powerful.
And